Hey everyone, welcome back to Adventures Never Far Away. If you've been following my channel at all, you know that a few weeks ago I went to Alaska. It was my first time being there and I had a lot of questions. People were asking me a lot of the same questions over and over again, so I thought it might be fun to put it up on Instagram and ask if you guys had any questions so I could do a Q&A video. This is my first time doing one of these, so here it goes. Yes, I have a few questions. Did you have fun? Why, yes, I did. It's always really interesting when somebody asks if you have fun because it's such a restricting question. It's a yes or no question, essentially, and it doesn't leave any kind of room. So I'm really glad that I got a lot of other types of questions. How cold was it? It was pretty cold. I tend to not get cold very easily. I have a lot of natural insulation and I've never been one to get cold. I went to school in Idaho and would always wear shorts in the snow, which I still do, but it was actually really, really cold and it really depended on what we were doing. So the first night we landed, we got in at 11:30, went out and got the car, went straight out into the mountains, and we're outside until I think 3:30 a.m. just standing around in the cold. It was so cold, I kept putting on more and more layers, and by the end of the night, I couldn't feel my feet. Now during the day, if you're out in the sun walking around, it wasn't too bad. It was, for me anyway, it was jeans, t-shirt weather, maybe have a jacket with me if I was in the shade a lot or not really moving around. Did you see any wildlife? Wow, I guess the biggest thing that we saw was some moose. I actually saw a really big moose when we were driving to the Chena Hot Springs, and then we saw a mama and a baby moose when we were driving to Tahkeena. And it was one of those moments where when I saw big papa moose, we were driving really, really quickly and I just happened to glance over, because when you're driving in the wilderness, you're constantly looking into the trees, into the forest to see if you can see any dark shapes moving, because then it gets really, really exciting. This was one of those occasions, and by the time I told Ashley that it was over there, we had driven by and we were on a time crunch, so there was no way to pull off and try to go see it again. So I saw 3 moose, she saw 2. Ooh, we saw some beluga whales. Unfortunately, we don't have any footage of that. Ooh, another exciting thing, when we were sea kayaking, we saw some bald eagles. I'd never seen a bald eagle before. That was so cool. If you went again, what would you do differently? Or what didn't you get to do this time? As with most trips, I think the biggest thing would be I would schedule more time there. Although we were there for, 5 full days, every day was jam-packed. There wasn't a lot of room for spontaneity. We did have a couple spontaneous stops during our road trip around interior Alaska, but it was go, 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 and I felt a little rushed at times, but that was because we had so much that we wanted to get done. We had places to go, and Alaska is huge, so it does take a lot of time to get around. I would have loved to explore Anchorage a lot more. We just stopped there for dinner. I stopped there to see the LDS temple, and that was pretty much it. We drove through it on our way to Whittier to go sea kayaking. I also would have loved to stay a little bit longer in Fairbanks, not on a holiday weekend. We were there over Labor Day weekend, so a lot of things were closed. Also, we're still in the middle of that situation that's been going on since last year, so a lot of things just aren't open or available. I've alluded to this before, but Ashley and I wanted to have one big penultimate adventure, and the first one that we had planned was to take a bush plane up to the Arctic Ocean on the northern coast of Alaska, to an island where we could photograph polar bears in their natural habitat. Unfortunately, the island that we would be visiting, the residents have closed it because of that situation that I alluded to that started last spring. And so our trip was canceled. And they offered us to schedule it for next year, but we won't be going next year, unfortunately. So that would have been really, really fun to go see these alpha animals in their habitat on the Arctic Sea. Like, it was just so bucket list, and I'm really sad that we didn't get to do it. Although our replacement adventure, sea kayaking amongst glaciers, was phenomenal as well. And I think the last thing that I would have really wanted to do was spend more time on our road trip. If you look at a picture of the state of Alaska, we did a huge circle through the interior, starting and ending in Fairbanks, working our way down to the coast to Anchorage, and then cutting back up Highway 4, I believe. And it was so beautiful because every mile or so there's a new lake, there's new wildlife, there's new forest. It's so pretty, and I wish that we would have had more time, the flexibility to stop more and to enjoy, maybe stay a couple extra nights during that part of the road trip. I think it would have been really fun. Like I mentioned earlier, we had to get back to Fairbanks because we were under a time crunch. Did you eat anything weird? Oh my gosh, who doesn't love food, right? Oh man, I was so excited. So a couple of things that stood out to me was I wanted to do a salmon bake. So we happened to go to Pioneer Park in Fairbanks. They have a place where they do a salmon bake, and it was the last night of the season that they were doing it. I couldn't believe our luck. I did not plan that. I didn't know what the season was. I assumed it was through September. Didn't know that it was ending on Labor Day, so we happened to time that perfectly. And so we had this delicious baked salmon with like a maple glaze on it. I also got us some king crab, Alaskan king crab, because hello. And then tons of fried halibut, and I had salmon berries. They look kind of like really plumptious raspberries with like hairs on them. It sounds really gross, but I do have some video.
But these are salmon berries. They're not actually from a salmon. These grow on bushes.
Looks like salmon roe.
They kind of do.
Yeah. Our sea kayaking guide, Calvin, went off and picked these for us. So they weren't the tastiest, but it was definitely one of those experiences that stuck out in my mind. We also ate a ton of reindeer and caribou. Reindeer sausage is huge out there. We met Santa in North Pole, Alaska, and he said if they don't fly, they fry. So we felt a little bit better about eating reindeer. So I had reindeer sausage and crepes. I had caribou chili, which was really good. I had caribou burgers. And because everything was closed, all the restaurants that we wanted to go to in Fairbanks, we ended up finding this place called the Creperie. And it was so good. And the first morning we get there and they have these crab stuffed avocados. Oh my goodness. They were so delicious. I couldn't help myself. I got that in a crepe. It was fun trying new things, especially in such a location that is so far removed from what I'm used to. It's just really fun and a really great way to dive into the culture. Even if it's part of the United States, it's still a different culture than what I'm used to in Utah. Okay, what were your top 3 experiences? Top 3? Only 3? Whew, okay. That's tough, but in order, starting with number 3, that would have to be just driving around Alaska, including our big road trip. I loved seeing the different landscapes. I loved driving along and then all of a sudden, boom, there's a glacier. Or boom, there's a double rainbow.
Double rainbow. What does this mean? What
double rainbow. Or, oh my goodness, there's tons of lakes everywhere. These mountains look like they're dripping with color. We saw every single color that you can naturally see in nature on our road trip, and you can't beat that. Well, actually you can, with number 2, which was sea kayaking in Blackstone Bay along the glaciers. It was so much fun. I love kayaking. I'm really good at it. I'm really strong. And I kayaked most of the 7 miles that we did, and I honestly thought I was going to be so sore the next day, because when you're kayaking, you're using all these muscles in your arms and your shoulders, and your neck, and also your core. But then we were in sea kayaks and they were tandems, and so I was in the back seat and I had foot pedals that I had to get accustomed to really, really fast, because we had a rudder in the back, which made it actually a lot easier to steer. But I wasn't sore the next day. It was super exciting. And number 1, the top adventure, the top experience was seeing those northern lights. That was how Alaska welcomed Ashley and I. It was unbelievable. We were so tired from a long day of travel. We had 2 flights. We had a drive out into the middle of this mountaintop in the dark. Neither of us really had any clue where we were going except what Ashley's GPS was telling us. We were trusting that. And then to get up to the top of Murphy Dome and the sky just exploded with color, you can't beat that. So wait, where did you go? We went to Fairbanks, Alaska, which is in the center of the state. And then we road tripped down. We went to Denali National Park. We stayed overnight in Willow, which is just north of Anchorage. We drove through Anchorage and we had to go to a town called Whittier to go sea kayaking. Then we went back up to Willow for the night, and then we continued on our road trip around the eastern part of Alaska along Highway 1 and Highway 4. And so we were kind of in the middle of nowhere for a while. And then we rounded it back up to Fairbanks, and we hit places like Talkeetna and North Pole and Chena and Nenana and these other places that I can't pronounce. Basically, we were in the center of Alaska and went down to the coast and back. Okay, I need to know one thing. How in the world did you find a rental car? Girl, let me tell you, it was a trip. Finding a rental car these days is near impossible. It is absolutely ridiculous. There's a shortage of rental cars across the country right now, and it goes back to production because of this lovely situation that we've been in since last year, and it has been a cause of grief and stress for the weeks leading up to our trip. As soon as I knew that we were going to Alaska, we had the flights booked, I booked our Airbnb, and then the next big thing was to find a rental car, because we knew that we wanted to go on a road trip. We knew that we wanted a car so we'd have the freedom to go look at the northern lights, and we weren't sure how long we were going to have to be searching for them, how many times we'd have to go out looking for them. Then there were so many things that we wanted to do, and to be honest, if you're going to Alaska and you're not going with a tour company, you need a rental car to get around. Yeah, there's a big train, and I think there's some public transportation in the bigger cities like Fairbanks and Juneau and Anchorage, but you are very limited, and we were going to be there on a holiday weekend, so I wasn't sure what the bus schedule was going to be like, and the train tickets were super expensive. So before the trip, I had actually spoken with 2 different people who both went to Alaska. One of them didn't really have any problems finding a rental car. The other ones had some major issues, and that really stressed me out until I heard of this app called Turo, where it's kind of like the Airbnb but for car rentals, and we were able to secure a car through Turo. It was very expensive. We got a SUV, 4-wheel drive, and I think we ended up paying $160 a day for this car. And we put some miles on that car. I think we logged about 1,200 miles because our round trip, road trip, the circle through the center of the state without stopping, if you just map it out on the Google Maps or something like that, it's 700 miles. Just that road trip. That doesn't count going down to Whittier, that doesn't count going up to Chena, that doesn't count going back and forth to Willow, to where our Airbnb was, or to North Pole a few times. So we put a lot of miles on that car. And we were very, very fortunate because our options were extremely limited. It was one of the few cars that was under $200 a day to rent, and whew, that, yeah, a lot of stress. Because we needed a car that was big enough for us to feel comfortable in, because we knew we were going to log quite a lot of time in that car. We knew we needed four-wheel drive because we weren't sure where our hunting for the Northern Lights was going to take us. And we also needed to make sure that the car was big enough so that if we got stranded or stuck somewhere, we'd be comfortable-ish sleeping in the car. Fortunately, we found a car that fit all that criteria. It was actually really funny because it had a huge crack through the windshield, which, not a big deal, but it was just kind of comical. So yeah, if you're going somewhere, as soon as you book your flight, get a rental car secured. Okay, were the Northern Lights really that pretty? Because your pictures look fake. Yes, the Northern Lights really were that pretty. The entire time we were watching the lights, we're taking pictures, and we have to, when you photograph at night, you have to have long shutter speed. So when you push the button down, you have to wait 30 seconds while it's sitting on a tripod for the picture to take. So there was a lot of times that Ashley and I would push the button and we'd just sit there. And we'd look at each other and say, is this real life? Are we really here? Yes. We were there at the perfect time. It's not always like that. We were there with some locals that I got chatting to, and they said this was a really good night. They were asleep. One of them got up to go to the bathroom, looked outside, saw the lights, and they took off and came up to the same spot that we were because they were so intense that night. So, yeah, they were that awesome. Thank you everyone for all of your questions. I loved my trip to Alaska, and I can't wait to go back. I'd love to go back during another season. Not winter yet, I'm not sure I'm ready for that. But it was really fun to relive these memories. I have a lot more stories for you that I'm going to put in my blog. I'm going to link it down below. If you have any questions about Alaska, feel free to ask. But until next time, we'll see you on our next adventure.